Right. Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everybody. This is the third week. Hope that everybody has been doing really well, having good time. Today, we're going to be talking about the GCC. GCC is the Gulf Cooperation Council. Gulf Cooperation Council. It's a regional organization and it has been formed by 6 states in the Gulf. Continuing to what we had last 2 weeks, we need to focus somehow on the establishment of this organization, which is an institution. And this institution is based on the consensus and acceptance of 6 states in the Gulf. So away from the whole Gulf, we have only 6 countries have been included in this organization. So as you can see here in this slide, the flags, the slide 2, the flags, you can see them of 6 countries that the establishment was in 1981. We will be talking later on how and why the establishment of the GCC in 1981. So 6 countries, including the Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Qatar, and Bahrain. So these 6 countries came together in 1981 in February in a meeting in Riyadh, forming this organization for the benefit of the social, economic, culture, security, and political levels. So when we talk about GCC, when we say GCC, it's a Gulf Cooperation Council, was established in 1981. The fact it was a need for such establishment to share the common interest in terms of economy and politics and social aspects. This is not the same like European community, it's not the same like other organizations in the world. Now we have lots of common features between the states in this organization. So going back to the 1981, that's almost 40 years ago, 39 years ago, we have the states joining each other. The Gulf Cooperation Council was established because the states were facing lots of difficulties at many levels. The founding document at that time was based on common features and similar systems, common features between the states and similar system. You will find that the language is the same, accent is almost similar to each other, the culture, the faith, the politics, it's almost the same in every single country of those 6 countries in GCC. So the founding documents was he adopted the special relationships between the binding founding countries of this organization, and this is becoming the umbrella of political, economic, and cultural aspects gathering the people of Arabian Gulf. But this did not include Yemen, did not include Iraq and Iran, because the Gulf countries, including 9 countries, so exception from Iraq and Iran and Yemen, the 6 countries have formed this organization for many reasons, mainly at the beginning of 1980, 1981, the fact was many threats and many risks in the region because of, first of all, we had what we had in 1978. Remember in 1978 what we had in the region? In 1978, we had the changes in Iran, Can you just give me 1 second to have something important? Just a second. Okay, coming back to the point, like the need for this umbrella, which is the organization to be established in 1981, because in 1978, we have the changes, the political changes in Iran. And this have a shadow of impact the shadow of impact on the Gulf countries in general, especially the six countries who formed the GCC. With some kind of concern that what happened in Iran could happen in anywhere else in the whole Gulf. You know what happened in Iran in 1978, the revolution against the Shah, against the political system. So there was kind of concern in the Gulf such situation could happen somewhere else. In addition, of course, in 1980 to 1988, we had the Iraq-Iran war. So amid this situation and the risk and the high risk, because the Gulf area it's one of the richest areas in the world, there was a need to establish an organization that can look after the people, the economy, the social aspects, and political sides. When this organization was established in 1981, the headquarters was in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. In addition, of course, to the military, the unified military command of the GCC countries to be in Riyadh. Why Saudi Arabia? Because Saudi Arabia is the largest in terms of population and in terms of land. It's almost 30 million people. But if you look at Bahrain, Qatar, less than 500,000. So Saudi Arabia is the largest in terms of population and the size of the country and the ability and the economy. And so this is why the headquarters was located in Riyadh. So what happens in 1968, you know that the Gulf area, GCC countries, were almost under the British authorities, the British mandate. The British forces somehow were located in the Gulf, and they had some influence on every country in the Gulf. Now, what we have is the independence. You see, Saudi Arabia was there. Oman was there for a long time, for many, many years, for thousands of years. But when you talk about countries such as Qatar, United Arab Emirates, the independence was in 1971. 1971. So in January 1968, the British forces announced they're going to leave. They want to leave. So that led to the independence of some states, some countries, and new countries in the Gulf. So we have 6 countries. So when we talk from 1971 till 1981, almost recent, like countries such as Qatar and UAE were established only in 1971 as a country, independent country. Yes, they have been there for many years, and the people, they have been there for thousands of years, but I'm talking about the independence. It's in 1971. From 1971 till 1981, not a long time. There was a need to be united. There was a need to be working together in many aspects, because the rich countries have to work together. When we talk about a small country foreign policy, if you study political science, you can understand there's a theory called small countries foreign policy, and that means that those small countries can have the impact and the influence beyond their own small size, because they have the ability in terms of diplomacy and money, the wealth, and so on. Before 1981, we had a meeting, and this meeting was an early stage by GCC countries on the sideline of the Arab Summit, which was held in Jordan in 1980. So the seriousness of becoming able to think in a wise way to be able to establish such an organization was in 1980. In 1980, in Jordan, we had the Arab Summit. If somebody can ask the question, what is the difference between Arab League and GCC? GCC is only 6 countries out of the Arab states. So even GCC countries are members of the Arab League. So what I'm saying here is, when we talk about the meetings and where in the side of the conference was held, or the summit was held in Jordan in 1980, and that was followed by a meeting, a preparatory meeting was in Riyadh in February 1981. That was not to have kind of any independence from the Arab League. That was signing the document by those countries to be able to share their own interests and their own common needs together. But this is not like, if you would like to compare it to EU. In EU countries, the first kernel for unity was economy. When you talk about Belgium and Netherlands and Germany and France and so on, that was the beginning, was about coal and steel. Coal and steel countries came together to build their economy. When we talk about the Gulf Cooperation Council, the idea was to protect the country from threat, from risk, from security threats from region and outside the region. So if you look at the common features and similarity between the systems and political systems and communities in GCC countries, you're going to find, they say, one is the Islamic culture, the Islamic value, the Islamic faith. So 6 countries in GCC believe in the same, like the majority of the population of the Islamic belief. You can have a sector, you can find sector, Sunni, Shia, and Ibadism, but the majority of those countries are Sunni. But again, like, I mean, this is something of a school of thought, of sect, but Islam is the main faith in these countries. 2, it's the heritage, because those countries used to live side by side with tribes and families living and moving, and like Oman and Saudi Arabia were the oldest countries in the regions, and the other tribes living in the same region, in the same area for many years, for thousands of years. The heritage is the same. You will find families who have been split between 2 or 3 countries. The similarities of the political system. Political system is almost the same. When we talk about the political system, take into consideration monarchy. Monarchy, yes. You call it a different name in Oman. They call it sultanate, sultan of the state. But it's a monarchy. In Saudi Arabia, it's a kingdom, but it's a monarchy. Bahrain, it's a kingdom. Now, in Qatar, it's emirate system. So it's the same, like it's a monarchic system, the family within the same family. Social demography composition, almost the same thing. The family, the civil culture and civilization affinity, it's almost the same in all 6 countries. This is why when we talk about the unity, it's not a unity, it's an organization, because unity is not the same. If you look, EU has a unity, European Union. So you don't have a visa, you have the ability to work and live, but this is not the same situation in GCC. You have some support from each country. People can move and can live in every country in GCC. But again, like, this is not like having the full citizenship in one country to be able to practice your life. This is not the same situation. We do have some limits. I mean, the question could be from any of you, from anybody who's listening to this lecture about deviation. Do you think that GCC as a council it's a council, but it's an organization, has it deviated from the national goals of Arab nation? No, there was no deviation, no split, but this is the more practical, a more professional organization who can look after specific nations and people within the same region, because they share lots of social and political systems in common. In addition to this, within the scope of the Arab League Charter, they still keeping the same thing. So the same activities. No, those states have the same activities within the wider Arab community, which having cooperation and coordination to strengthen the Arab nation. Again, like, I mean, this is in theory fine, but in practice, we do have lots of difficulties and impediments. We can talk about them later. In this slide, I'm talking about the main principles upon which was based with the equality we have, the equality between these countries. If you become a member of any organization, you're going to share the equality. Voting system, sovereignty, peaceful settlement of disputes, non-interference in internal affairs, full affiliation with Arabism and Arab organizations, adherence to the policy of non-alliance. So these points are shared between every country in this organization, in the council. So we don't have to say, even though Saudi Arabia is the largest in number and in size, and GDP could be one of the highest, but then they are equal in voting and sovereignty. Qatar is one of the smallest. It's almost 500,000 people, less than 500,000, the population of Qatar. But then again, sovereignty is the same. We don't look at the size or the number of population. Equality, it's one of the basic elements of this organization. Let's have a look at the vices, the bodies within the council. What is the council consist of? GCC is a council, consists of three main bodies. Number one is the Supreme Council. Supreme Council, it's made of heads of state, kings or sultan or emir, the head of state, 6 heads of state component of or making the Supreme Council, and this is the highest, it's the highest body of the GCC. What they're doing exactly? It's a presidency, and its meeting comes once a year. They meet once a year according to the alphabetic order in the name of the country. So every time a country would take the lead as the president of this council. So the supreme policy could be set by the council. Supreme policy are set by the council. Now they look at the issues of concern to member state. Anything of concern is not about only one specific social, culture, economy, money, currency, politics, anything of those countries, they have been looked at the Supreme Council. Supreme Council with the concern to the member state, recommendations, report, studies, projects that the ministerial council submit. So the final decision is always made at the Supreme Council as the head of a state member of this council. So this comes once a year. So they say that this year, next year going to be in Bahrain. Last year would be in Saudi Arabia. So every year, the meeting could be in one different state. And this is an annual regular session. In addition to this, there are some kind of special sessions. Those special sessions could be held upon the request of any member state. Any member state can request a special session to be held by the Supreme Council. And within 5 days, we need another partner, another member state to approve and to accept such exceptional special session. Whatever the situation, one country can ask for this special session, another country can accept it, and this meaning that we have to call for this session, which can be within 5 days from the date of the invitation. Special session, like you could be asking what exactly special session would be, maybe concern about security, conflict, pandemic, whatever situation that can affect the whole system. The second body is the Ministerial Council. And this is made of foreign ministers of every state of the 6 states. Foreign minister consists of foreign minister of the member states, or any minister could be representing their own country. Now, who's leading, who's gonna be like taking the lead here in this kind of, this it's not about the lead itself who's taken over. I think it's alphabetics, like every time somebody can lead the meeting of the Ministerial Council. Alphabetics, it depends on the Supreme Council. Let's say last year was Saudi Arabia. The Supreme Council was in Saudi Arabia leading. Now this year, the Ministerial Council will be led by Saudi Arabia. The next year will be shifting, like every time presidency will be from a different country. So the Supreme Council, that can really be the higher authority, which can look at the issues, recommendations, and any study or any report could be made by the Ministerial Council. The third body third body is called the General Secretariat. And this is dealing with administrative points such as the appointment of employees, the locations, the spending of the money and the budget and offices and equipments and logistics and so on and so forth. Secretary General is appointed by the Supreme Council. So the Supreme Council as the highest body can appoint the Secretary General. Now, Secretary General from Bahrain. It could be any citizen, it could be anybody, anyone from the GCC countries, any citizen can be Secretary General, who would be serving for 3 years, and this could be renewed for once. And she would have assistants, employees who are going to be working with them, becoming most likely from GCC countries, with exception, you can have sometimes people who could be working for these units from anywhere else, but most likely they're going to be coming from GCC countries. Finally, the final body here is called Dispute Settlement Commission, and this is really important in terms of disputes. But this is not something fixed. This unit is not something fixed for life or for long time. This is only formed, depends on the situation. Dispute Settlement Commission is formed from a number of citizens of the states of GCC. Minimum number have to be 3 people, professionals. Could be lawyers, judge, engineers, medical doctors, it depends, but most likely people who are professionals who know how to deal with conflicts, and their number is minimum 3. And the authority may seek the assistance of anybody from outside the GCC countries. What they're going to do here, what they're going to do with the Dispute Settlement Commission, this commission is very important. If we have a conflict, you see, look at the slide 13. The commission is located in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Jurisdiction of the commission, it's taken from the council itself. And this commission, it's formed when we have conflict. So we selected 3 members, at least 3, could be 5, 7 members, and this number to look at this conflict. Those members should not be from the country which has a conflict. Let's say today we have a conflict between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. If a commission has been formed to look at this conflict between Qatar and Saudi Arabia, the members of the commission should not be from Saudi Arabia nor from Qatar. Should be independent individuals or from other countries. Then finally, this commission, once they make a report, will submit it to the Supreme Council. Once they end the job, this job is done, the commission will not be able to stand anymore, will be resolved. Then the question is here for you and for me as well. What about the conflict? What about the conflict we have today? Qatar crisis, which I'm going to be talking about, I think, next week or the week after. Qatar crisis. We'll call it sometimes Gulf crisis. Any decision had been made by this commission? No. Was the commission formed? No. Now, this commission has not been formed because the conflict is between Qatar from one side and Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain on the other side. What has been left is Kuwait and Oman, Kuwait and Sultanate of Oman. They have trying their best. They have been trying their best. We have seen many attempts made by Kuwait and Oman to solve this conflict, but have not been successful for many, many reasons. I'm not going to be talking about this now because we're going to have a full lecture to have this topic. So what I'm saying that even this council, which we think is really important council and supposed to be having unity and prosperity and cooperation, is not functioning nowadays. We have a question mark on the functionality of this council, of this organization nowadays, especially with the conflict we have. But we still have some achievement. Even though we have conflict, We do have a crisis, but the function is not the same like before. Not much achievement, but we do have some achievement, as you can see now in this slide 15. Look at the achievements we have. Achievements and integration, the accomplishments we have for the past years, many aspects. Let's see, one is the common Gulf market. We have a common Gulf market. Two, the customs union, monetary union, electricity, economy, development, security, smuggling and anti-smuggling issues, anti-terrorism, social aspects, culture, aviation. So we do have many achievements have been done for the past 39 or 40 years in the GCC, even though we have stallment now, things are not going in the right direction. But this is why I'm saying since 2017, for the past 3.5 years, we do have a crisis. But this crisis within the council, between members of the council, did not impede the council from some issues. It's not being paralyzed, it's still functioning on a low scale. On a low scale, especially we know that the social aspects, the market and the culture and the economy and politics, we do have some, even the meetings we have. Annual meetings have been held. Even in Saudi Arabia last time, Qatar was invited. So that we, even with the crisis, we're still functioning. It is really important to keep such body, because I think unity, cooperation can help a lot. And if you look at the international relations, we will look at conflict and cooperation. What we see at the international level, cooperation always taken over. Cooperation, even though we see conflicts in the Middle East, in many countries in the world, in Asia and Africa and Latin America, we do have conflicts, but these conflicts would not affect the cooperation level. We do have cooperations in economy, in culture, communications, in finance, in environment, in health, and so on. This is why we think that we have to keep the minimum connection between these countries. So keeping this council is better than dissolving it. And the last slide here, the council, the GCC Council as an organization have striking partnerships with many countries outside and between. Within the countries, we do have lots of achievements, even though we do have conflicts. Outside the countries and member states of the GCC, we do have contribution to strengthen regional strategic partnerships. They have partnership with the United States, with European countries, with African countries. But again, like if you look at the package, one package, GCC do not have that much relationship with many countries and organizations as their individual country within the GCC. So every single country in the GCC have its own way. So every one of them have a strong link with the United States. So every country within the GCC have very strong link with the United States, especially in terms of military bases, but not at the council level, not at the organizational level. The GCC have achieved as well coordination, integration, independence among its states in all fields, including coordination of their policies towards in relation towards other countries. So we do, even though we compare the situation with many organizations in the world, we find the achievements is less than many other organizations in the world. But again, like, which is better? Keeping this GCC or dismantling it? I believe keeping such an organization would help solving the conflict. And I'm sure that within the next or the near future, we're going to find a way for the solution for the crisis in GCC countries. Thank you for your time. Then we can open the floor for discussion. We're not going to stay here for long today. My voice is going off. This is the last day of the week. By the way, tomorrow we're going to have, tomorrow and after tomorrow, we have the national days in Oman. The national day was supposed to be last week, but the holiday for the national day is tomorrow, which is Wednesday and Thursday. Right, let's open the floor for questions now.
Okay, thank you, Professor, for this insightful lecture. Now I'm gonna let the participants who have questions for you. Dear participants, if you have a question, please raise your hands and I'm gonna unmute you so you can ask the question. Sabir Ahmet Kuchay, go on, please. Can you hear us, Sabir?
No, I cannot. I can hear you, yes, Dr. Ahmed. I can hear you, but nobody else. Who would like to ask the question? Can you raise your voice, please?
I guess Sabir Ahmet Kuchay has a question, but he or she is not available now. So I guess his or her question also delivered the Q&A section and asked that how GCC can adopt the policies to counter real threats from foreign foes like Zionism, modernization, westernization, and settled colonialism. I guess the question...
The last point?
Westernization and settled colonialism. Do you want me to repeat?
Yeah, no, this is fine. The GCC countries, unfortunately, they have not been working as one unity all the time because of the some kind of interest have been for the past decade. I mean, if you look back at the beginning and the establishment of GCC countries in 1980s and 1990s, there was kind of more cooperation between them. But if you look today, we have some kind of semi-independent state policies. So what we're talking about for example, normalizations and colonization is not exist as per se, but if you look at the legacy, yes. I mean, today, for example, we had one of the master students in our college here. They were talking about the legacy of colonialism in one of the countries in the Middle East. Do we have legacy of colonialism? Yes, definitely yes. For example, when we talk about the British legacy still exists. You can see this in military bases, language, educational systems. Now, there's kind of lots of influence, especially on the political aspects. And every single country in the council here have its own way and connection with the UK. Now, recently, we have the United States, especially after the Second World War, the United States having its own military bases in almost every country in GCC. But then every state in GCC think because of the threat coming from outside the GCC, mostly Iraq, from Iran, from Yemen, even they consider Yemen as a threat, not as a country, but because of the conflict in Yemen as well. Not even this, because they think what Iran could be the main threat. Iran could be the main threat for the GCC because of the different sectarianism and political ideology. So they think that the best way is having cooperation, collaboration, and alliance with the United States and with the UK. So what happens, I have one of my papers about collective security in the Gulf, and I was calling for collective security, meaning GCC countries with Iran and Iraq and Yemen to have kind of security alliance. But unfortunately, this is not happening because some countries believe they have been threatened by other countries. I mean, one of the examples we have in 1990, the invasion of Kuwait. Kuwait was invaded by Iraq in 1990. So when you ask Kuwaitis, they will say, no, never, we cannot do this, even though the system have changed in Iraq. It's same thing like today we have Saudi Arabia and Qatar Qataris and Saudis do not have the same policy and the same ideology. So this is why every country have its own relationship with the United States, and like this is kind of institutionalization of the legacy of Western influence. So legacy of UK and US still here strongly. Anybody, Mr. Ahmed, I think you have to unmute because the one who wants to ask the question, you have to unmute them.
Yeah, I'm do that.
That's why I think.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, so my question is that GCC established for security and stability of member countries. My first question is GCC took sufficient measures for
Can you? I cannot hear you well.
Sorry, I just made a mistake.
Yes, okay. Now you hear me, sir?
Yes, now, yeah, yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you. My GCC established for security and stability of member countries. My first question is that is GCC took sufficient measures and provide sources to achieve this? And my second question is that the GCC succeeded in the goals for which it was created?
Thank you for the questions. Question one is about the measures. There is a force, yes. There's a military force called Dera al-Jazeera, Dera, which is kind of the body. It's kind of military force was established. And this military force was number of like few thousand of soldiers. But in fact, it's not effective. It's not working. There's not much cooperation and coordination. So the measures have not been taken at the military level. But if you talk about security, yes, we do have security cooperation between the intelligence, the intelligence forces sharing information, the checkpoints. One of the best checkpoints, airports, security information, intelligence. It is one of the best in the Middle East. And this is why you find stability. Stability exists in almost every single country in GCC. In addition, of course, because of the influence of the money and the economy and good living conditions. But when you talk about security forces sharing information, that is one of the most important things. And this is giving them the chance to be able to be free of armed violence. But again, at the outside level, for the outside level, cooperation has been for the minimal cooperation between the security forces. In the second question about the goals, yes, the lots of achievements in terms of the market, the economy, the business, the social aspects, but we don't have like that kind of success in military and political. In political aspects, we have failure. But we have success in terms of, again, because this organization is not only to protect the country from the risk, but we talk about the taxation for taxation system, economy, finance, social, culture. Yes, we have lots of success and people are able to move and invest in many countries. Like anybody from the Gulf, GCC countries can move and can invest and can live in other countries. So we do have some success at the social, economic level. Thank you for the question.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, my name is Aviruchi Chaudhary from India. Sir, we have an organization, SARC here. Sir, but the thing is, the problem is there is something called Article 10, which says that decisions have to be made by the consent of all member countries. So my question is something like this is also present in GCC, and do you think that something like this Article 10 should be present in organizations like SARC and GCC?
Thank you for the question. Well, it depends. It depends on two things. Number one, it depends on the number of states in the organization, and number two, it depends on the formation and the objectives of this organization. I cannot see why not having consensus when we talk about small number of member states. GCC is a small number, 6 states. So if you're going to take decision by majority in everything, I think it's not going to be something simple and easy to be accepted. And this is located and this is stated in the constitution of this organization. I'll give you an example, a case. Joining GCC. Let's say that tomorrow that Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates decided that Egypt should become a member of the GCC. And we have the majority 4 votes. Would it be acceptable? No. Because this is not going to be not going to satisfy other states such as Qatar, for example, maybe other states like Kuwait. So what I'm saying is that kind of very important decisions have to have consensus. Anything can affect, because this have to be expressed well in the constitution of the organization. When you talk about the United Nations, you look at United Nations, majority is fine. Even the Security Council, 9 out of 15 in the Security Council, 9 vote out of 15 with no veto would be okay. Majority in General Assembly. It depends on every organization in the world, and it depends on the kind of decision we have to look at. And it's not about kind of random decisions. It's not spontaneous. Things have to be done based on the constitution, based on the charter of this organization. So what I'm supporting myself, I support the GCC to take decision based on consensus, because it's a small number, 6 states, and anything can affect them, especially now this organization have been there and we have conflicts between them. And if we're going to depend on the majority decision, then that would be at the expense of some of those states.
Hello, Professor.
Do you hear me, sir?
Hello.
Do you hear me, sir? Yeah, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. My name is Abdurrahman Muhammad. I'm from Somalia. Do you hear me, sir?
Yes, Abdurrahman, I hear you. Yes.
Yeah. Sir, I just want to talk about the Gulf cooperation. Gulf cooperation, when we are talking about cooperation, means as a politically and economically, but nothing cooperation both these sectors. For example, when we are talking about cooperation, meaning that we have all basic needs like common currency, custom union, and trade union. And politically, Gulf countries are divided for both socially and culturally, while there is some obstacles facing for some countries like blockade of Qatar on June 2017, and all parties are requested Qatar to fulfill 13 articles, including shutdown for Al Jazeera, to Kuwait for weaponizing the terrorist groups like ISIS, Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, and to deploy or withdraw Turkish troops in Qatar. That is the stage of Qatar. But my question is, how all GC countries responded the effects of economically and socially and politically that blockade affected the Qatar, and still the blockade is not and still the blockade is existing. That's my question. Say, have a nice day.
Thank you, Abdurrahman. This is a good question. Away from the politics and away from the military cooperation or conflict between the states, what about the humanitarian assistance for Qatar? That's the question. Kuwait and Oman were able to help, especially Oman. Oman was able to establish a channel of communication with Qatar and Qataris. And you know, at the beginning of the crisis, some Qataris were stuck in Saudi Arabia. They could not go back home. What happened? Sultanate of Oman have created a bridge between Saudi Arabia and Oman. So carrying the Qatari people from Saudi Arabia to Oman and from Oman to Qatar. So in addition to this, of course, Oman have done a lot in this case. We have the port of Suhar, which is close somehow to United Arab Emirates and to Qatar. This port of Suhar has been allocated and was allocated to transfer goods and commodities to Qatar. So we have lots of commodities coming from many countries in the world, coming to Oman as a third country, and from Oman to Qatar. So Oman was kind of mediating partner in this case. But again, this was not, has not been welcomed. This kind of move was not welcomed by the Saudis and by the blockading countries that Oman is helping the Qataris. This is why I think we had some kind of tension, what we'll call it, hidden tension, which is not in the media, it's not in the news. Politicians don't talk about it, but this is a fact. So Oman was accused of helping Qatar. Again, like Kuwait was opening its boundaries, same like in Oman, but not exactly, because Oman was able to lead in terms of economy and support. Same thing with Turkey. Turkey was able to provide Qatar with commodities which is needed. But if they do something important, you know, this blockade, it comes as a punishment for the blockading countries themselves, because many of the commodities were coming from Saudi Arabia, many of them to Qatar in the past, such as dairy products, they stopped. So the Saudis have lost in this in terms of economy. Same thing with the United Arab Emirates. So Oman has made some money, Iran have made good money, and other countries. So at the same time, Qatar was able to have some self-independent in terms of industry. We have seen farming in many aspects in Qatar. Some factories have been established. Qatar is becoming able to depend on itself in many aspects after this blockade. So the blockade itself somehow strengthened Qatar. I'm taking much of this, but next week, inshallah, we're going to be talking about this in more details. Is that okay, Abdurrahman?
Yeah. Yes, okay. Yes, okay. Thank you, sir.
Hello, Professor. Can you hear me?
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikum assalam.
Terima kasih.
Hello.
Good evening. Good evening from Indonesia.
We have okay, good evening.
My name is Fuad. I'm from Indonesia. I have 2 questions for this session. I've read an article saying that Qatar wants to get out from GCC. What do you think if Qatar come out? Will it affect to GCC? And the second, what do you think about the Arab Spring? It almost occurs to chokehold the Middle East, except GCC. What do you think? Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the questions. I don't think that Qatar want to leave. That I've heard about this. There was some kind of news about it, but it's not official thing. I don't think that Qatar would leave the GCC. If they wanted to leave, they would have done it. And even if Qatar have left, this could be some kind of consideration. There was nothing official. I've heard from some people, and this is what is, take it from me as unofficial, because I'm not sure about it, but I've heard from somebody that Qatar wanted to leave. Yes, but we're not sure. Definitely, we're not sure about this. But I don't think this is happening now. But if it happens, this will not affect the GCC. This will not affect the GCC. GCC will still there, because the 5 countries, if it's still without Qatar, will be able to manage in many aspects. And I don't think there's going to be a good decision to leave the GCC unless the Qatari policymakers believe this being member of GCC can affect and influence them in a negative way. But for now, I think being in the GCC for Qatar, it's a wise decision. And I think continuing to be a member that would at least give them the chance to be able to communicate for the long term with other GCC countries. And this could be one of the bases for finding a solution. Because you know what, in conflict, communication is really important. Communication needed. So this is the situation, but we're not sure if this is happening. Second question about the spring, Arab Spring, or sometimes we call it political transformations in the Middle East, did not affect GCC countries. For some reasons, GCC countries do not suffer from poverty. If you look at Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, Libya, I mean away from Libya, but other countries, most likely people went out in the street because they wanted to change the situation because of the unemployment, because of the dictatorship, because of many reasons, but most likely the life conditions are really bad for them. They could not survive. They could not live a good and decent life, no decent life in many countries. But if you look at GCC countries, people living in one of the best conditions. So they don't need to change anything in terms of politics. Why a citizen of a country would like to change a political system or elites if they can have free education, free medications, excellent infrastructures, employment, high salaries, good living conditions, safety and security. So it does not make sense for them really that to change the political elites. And this is why they did not have much influence. Oman, for example, in Oman, we had some people went out in the street in 2011, only for a few days, but they were asking for employment. Some of them were unemployed. Then the Sultan and the government employed 50,000 people within 2 years. In Bahrain, we had some attempts, but Bahrain, it's a special situation because Bahrain, it's kind of conflict having led by sectarian Sunni and Shia. That somehow was fueling the conflict and lasted for quite a long time. But then I'm not going to go in details. This is kind of unique situation in Bahrain, which I think now it's becoming peaceful country, no conflict. Again, coming back to the conditions of life. Conditions of life are much better than many countries in the Middle East, leading people to think many, many times before they ask for change. Libya, for example, Libya was one of the best countries in the Middle East and North Africa. We know that scholarships were given to students to study abroad. Good living conditions. Libya was one of the best. But what happened with the changes? We have the interference by the United States and other countries, NATO, United Nations, Arab states, Egypt, and so on and so forth. So Libya has been divided. So the situation in the past was much better. Now in Libya, it's kind of, there's one of the points I'm talking about, imitations. I have one of my publications about the spring, Arab Springs in the Middle East. One of the points, the causes of what's happened, the widespread from Tunisia to Egypt to Libya and Yemen, and that young people want to imitate. This is one of the things. That's only one, but one point. But most likely people want to change because they would like to improve their life conditions. But this is not happening in the Gulf because living conditions are the best.
Hello, Professor. May I ask a question? May I ask a question? Yes. Thank you for the great talk. I have questions about the foreign influence in the region. Could you talk about very briefly the process of the British withdrawal from the region, the Gulf region, and the process of the American infiltration in the Gulf region? Why the Great Britain withdrew from the region, and how this process that I just have mentioned affect the regional policies in the Gulf region? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Safet, for this. Am I spelling your name fine? I'm saying. UK, Great Britain left the Middle East. This is a big question. In fact, it's not about the Gulf, is only, no, but it's, you talk about the Middle East. For example, Palestine was under the British mandate until 1948. The British authorities were in the Middle East, in Africa, in India, in Pakistan. So Britain was an empire where the sun does not set. Sun does not set. So the British have Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, Palestine, the Gulf. So why shrink? You know, this is the nature and the norm of states in the world. No state can live forever. You know, ups and downs. But again, like Britain was not able to keep its own legacy, was not able to keep its own influence in the world. People become aware that we have to end such occupation and colonization in the world. You see, look at India, for example, and what happened, the British, what they did in India. Look at Palestine, what they did in Palestine, and give it now and make it, giving to the Jewish community, becoming now having a state in Palestine called Israel. And I'm, as a Palestinian, lost my country to the other community because of the British. So the British were smart somehow, but they lost at the end their own influence. But eventually they could not lead. They could not stay. They found it expensive, it's costly for them, and they had to leave. But when they left the Middle East, when they left the Gulf and the GCC countries, they left behind them legacy. The British left a legacy. They left the influence, military influence, security, intelligence. Intelligence is active very much, as you can imagine. Intelligence, information, influence in politics. So that was for them a much easier way to have influence than being physically. Now, with the time, we have the Second World War. We have United States becomes one of the strongest, if not the strongest countries in the world. Now, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990, we have the United States becomes bipolar. It's the only country, it's bipolar, you know what I mean? Bipolar, leading the whole and the entire political system in the world. Now, the United States expanded. If you want to be a great power, you have to expand, you have to have a military bases, strong economy, influence, and this what happened. The United States having influence in the Middle East. So we have witnessed in 1991, the Gulf War, with the military forces, the coalition came to liberate Kuwait from Iraq. That was the situation. Anyway, whatever you call it in terms of politics, but the United States in the region, in the Gulf, but I mean, it exists before that. It has military bases, and those military bases existed before. But then with the time, United States having its own military bases in many countries in the world. If you look at the map of the world, we have like military bases of the United States in every continent, in Asia, in Africa, in Middle East, okay? So the United States now, somehow, leaving military bases, but they don't have much control on physical activities in every society because they don't need this. What they have is cooperation, coordination with local authorities, having intelligence, working. And you know that the CIA, the United States, working almost in every city in the world, they have somebody. Imagine, look at almost every city. I'm not talking about every country, almost every city, they could have somebody working for them. So that kind of remote control influence. Now, this is why we say legacy is still, legacy of UK and USA is still in the Middle East and many countries in the world.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Apa sih?
Okay. Next.
Can you hear me, Professor?
Jilan.
Yes. Firstly, I wanted to
okay, who's that?
For your efforts from Jordan. Yes, my question is.
Okay, Jilan.
Yes, My question is, do you think the political positions of Organization of Islamic Cooperation are restricted to the Saudi economy, especially with the recent events, you know, that the strikes directed by the Houthis on Saudi Arabia, especially the targeting of fuel tanks, have an impact on the economy of other countries? Thank you.
Jilan, what was the first part of the question? You talk about
Yeah,
which organization?
Yes, about political position of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation are restricted to the side of
the Islamic
Saudi economy, especially related with the last event about strikes by Houthis.
The Islamic Cooperation Organization is not functioning like basically in physical way in many countries in the world. Most likely we have is, I mean, we can sometimes it's not functioning there well. It's not making decision to be implemented. We talk about statements and we talk about they do have sometimes condemnations and legal steps, but again, like practically, how much has been done for Yemen, for Palestine, for many countries, for many Muslim countries? We talk about now specific organization. Jilan, you talk about an Islamic organization. This is not only limited to the GCC or the Middle East. No, this is beyond. This is an Islamic organization including all Muslim countries, supposed to have a more powerful, strong position, but it's not working well. Why? Why? Because many Muslim countries who are a member of this organization do not feed it well in logistics and money and political support. I mean, imagine if this Islamic organization is really becoming effective, working at the international level, we're going to be having the most influence after the United Nations. Could be having influence, want to become one of the most influential organizations in the world, but it's not functioning because of the conflict. Which conflict? Between Muslim states. See, you mentioned this, Saudi Arabia and Iran, for example. Saudi Arabia is not working with Iran, and they're not going to be working with each other. We have the split in the Muslim world, in the Islamic world. That kind of a split affect and influence the activities and functionality. When we talk about international organization, we talk about the theory of functionalism. What is functionalism? In how this organization can function, what they're doing. We talk about the cooperation, but this is one of the organizations who's not functioning in the best way. We do have annual conference, okay, but what comes out of this statement? The same exactly like Arab League. Arab League is not functioning well. It's not really doing much for many cases. What happens for Yemen, for Libya? What about the Arab League? What happened in Lebanon? Any decision has been made? Anything, any step have been taken? So this is the same situation. So unfortunately, you know, not much has been done. Thank you, Jilan, for the question.
Thank you, Professor.
Professor
Okay,
Albasoos.
anyone else? Can we take the next 10 minutes?
Okay,
yes.
We have also many questions from the Q&A part. One of them is asked by Datu Haris Sakilan, and asks that who or what country or organization did GCC countries look up to in forming this council?
That's a good question. I think it's kind of, this is not exactly like any organizations in the world. It's unique because it's based on small number of countries. It's not the same like European Union. It's not exactly like African Union. It's not like the Arab League. So this is a more closed organization because the countries are rich and risk is high. So you could say that they have taken bits and pieces from every organization to be able to form such an effective mechanism to build such a more social, cultural, economic organization. Now, if you look, for example, at EU, and I mentioned this many times before, this is not the same situation. EU is based on unity. It's a unity. So a citizen of any country in EU can live and work and can have the benefit exactly the same like any other citizen in EU countries, can move and live in any country. Freedom of movement, taxations and investment and so on. In GCC countries, we have some limitations on the freedom of movements and investment. We do have that system is happening, but not a free, exactly like EU. African Union, for example, this could be one of the best examples, African Union. But in African Union, we have diversity in terms of faith, ethnicities, and so on. But in GCC, we have almost the same. It's the same faith and ethnicity and culture and language and many common things. Again, like what led most likely to establish this, it's the risk was, or the high risk, because of the changes in the Middle East, especially the war between Iraq and Iran in 1980. In 1980, the war between Iraq and Iran. In 1978, the revolution in Iran. That was high risk for those countries, and that influenced them to think even within the region, because the Middle East is the Middle East, and we have the Arab League still there, and those countries in GCC are members of the Arab League.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Another question comes from Safi Mazlan. Abdurrahim, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question to ask the professor.
Yes, please go on.
And I salute the professor, and this is I think the second time I have attended. It was very fruitful meeting, actually, and facilitation. I actually like it. The question which I have also shared in the chat box is because these GCC countries have got and their agreements. Do other countries also in the neighboring areas like Somalia can attend their meetings like the one you said the foreign ministers have sometimes in the year? Or maybe doing benchmarking land. Yeah.
Are you from Somalia?
Yes, I'm from Somalia, actually.
Are you aware that we have some kind of influence made by Qatar and United Arab Emirates in Somalia?
Yeah. Yes, I know. Actually, I know. And the position of my country, we took.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. We should talk about this because I have one of my master students. One of my master students is doing his master thesis on the competition between United Arab in the Horn of Africa, but focus on Somalia. So it would be nice if we can chat. I can take your email and we can talk later on.
Okay.
Hello? Okay, go on. The question is like if Somalia can attend, if you can send your email to Mr. Ahmed, he can pass it to me so we can talk about this.
Thank you. Thank you, understood.
Fine. You're welcome. And in your question, you asked about if who can attend, nobody can, no one else can attend the meetings only for the member state of the GCC. No one else from the GCC could attend unless he or she could be invited for such meeting, because this is an organization limited to the member states only. But I would like to talk to you about the many issues concerning the competition of some GCC countries in Somalia and in the Horn of Africa, because Somalia is one of the richest countries. Somalia is one of the best locations in the whole region, and lots of competition now between many states to have influence in Somalia. It's one of the most interesting areas for research, Somalia. Any other question, Mr. Ahmed?
Okay. The last question, if you would like to.
Yes.
And Safi Mazlan asked that, is there any military agreement within the GCC in order to secure stability in the region? For instance, the EU supranational concept that essential for its members in protecting each other.
Yes. One of the agreements between them, it's concerning the military and security cooperation and coordination. And part of the GCC itself, there was an establishment of a military force. There was a military force was established. It's called Al Jazeera Shield. If you look for it, you're gonna find it. Al Jazeera Shield. That's a military force was established within the council, but it's not really functioning well because Al Jazeera Shield is supposed to be a military unit supported by every single state financially and physically, but it have a limited number of soldiers, and it's be called when it's needed. There was a suggestion made by Sultan Qaboos many years ago. Sultan Qaboos suggested that a military force could be established to protect the GCC countries. Out of this could be a military force is made of 100,000 soldiers. But, elites and equipment with equipment. Now, Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates have Middle East, one of the best, I mean, in the Arab region at least. And this comes from the United States, and this is why now you asking for P-35, P-35, they want to buy from the United States with the permission from Israel. I mean, lots of things could be done if a decision could be made, but there's nothing else apart from that kind of what is mentioned, the shield, Al Jazeera Shield, which was already established long ago, but it is not working well, it's not functioning. The limitations, the ineffectiveness of this force, countries are not helping. Apart of this, we have a strong cooperation in security between the states, and this is arranged by what is called understand, where we have strong relation between them in terms of security and intelligence at the internal level, not outside.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Okay. I'm done. If you have any question, it's fine. If not, we can call it off for now.
Okay. Is there anybody have a question? No, I think. Okay, that's all for today. So.
All right. Thank you very much for your time and for the questions you have. I'm sorry I cannot answer every question. In the chat box, I've seen many questions, but again, like attendees and participants asking question using the mic would be much easier for me. So next time, inshallah, we're going to be talking, I think, about, is it Qatar crisis next time? I think it is. I have to look at my schedule. Right, see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.